So after the racing in Hawaii, I got the factory to build a tempo wing with unicarbon to the outside, and they protested and everything because it's very difficult to build because the woven carbon is nice. It gives a nice, pretty carbon layer and hides whatever's going on underneath with bumps or bubbles or anything. It's a nice buffer in there. But having the unicarbon on the outside, it was difficult. Are you still talking area?
Well, that's the number that's on the foil. So
Yeah.
that's what
I
how would
try
you,
and like
how would you
I
describe them then? Like
span.
just span.
Well, no, I mean, all of the details are important. There's no doubt
Yes.
about that. But in my opinion, if you're comparing foils, the span is the number one thing. The span is basically what gets you up. The biggest problem that I see with using a foil with a tattle box is that to make something stiffer, you make it thicker, and you also add cord to it, which actually helps with the torsion.
Mhm.
And the cord and the thickness that we need at the top of the mast is much thicker than a tuttle connection, and it's much
Okay.
longer than a tuttle connection. So to build something that's this fat and then step in to a little tiny skinny tuttle, that makes no sense at all.
Did you know that when you're in the water, in cold water, that you can actually grow bone in your ear canal and it can close up? And if it closes up completely, you cannot hear anymore. If it closes up a little bit and the water gets in, it cannot get out. That can lead to infection. So, protect yourself. Get yourself some earplugs. These are SurfEars. The link is in the description if you want some. The cool thing about SurfEars is it prevents water from coming in, but you can still hear because it's got this mesh fabric that still lets audio through, which is nice.
This is Up on Foil, the podcast for everyone flying just above the surface. Pump, carve, soar, let's foil!
This episode is also sponsored by Foilsessions, but more on that later.
Hey, so cool, man. Thank you so much that you take your time. That's awesome.
Cheers. Good to meet you in person a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just get into the episode because I have so many questions. And I'm usually introducing myself as well for people who've never listened before. So that's just gonna be a little intro, and then we take it from there.
Go for it. Yep.
All right. Welcome to episode number 83 of Up on Foil, the podcast where we talk all about foiling. And today is with Adrian Roper. And let me introduce us real quick. I'm Matt. I'm an average foiler, kind of a weekend warrior, a lot of dock starting, a lot on the parawing as well. And you are Mr. Axis. And it's actually funny because I thought you need no introduction, but you actually do, because a couple of weeks ago or days ago, there was one guy on Facebook who tagged you and said, I really have no idea who you are, but you seem to be very closely related to the design of Axis foils. And I saw that and thought, well, that's a perfect possibility for you to reintroduce yourself for people who don't know you. So maybe we can just start with that.
My name's Adrian, and I do the design stuff for Axis. I also do the construction side, which is a big part of building foils now. Like, it's all very well to design something, but a lot of them are getting harder and harder to actually build and produce. So working on the building side as well, and that involves a lot working with China and all the factories and making everything correct.
And you're traveling a lot as well. Like, I try to make a podcast or make an appointment for a podcast with you. And he's like, well, yes, I'm here and I'm there. And that's you're all over the world all the time. How's that
I did
going?
an awful lot of traveling. Last year was outrageous, and it was kind of exhausting. So I'm trying to make it a little less hectic this year.
Is that possible at all?
We'll see. I'll give it a go. Yeah.
How has your year been? You've been at the boat in Düsseldorf, right?
Just went to the boat show there, which was really good. We had quite a crew there, and Kai Thompson also came along and had a go at the dock start racing, which was kind of fun. Yeah, it was a really, really good event. And I think actually talking about the dock starting racing there, I've been twice to the boat show, and I think that's possibly the best racing for dock start that I've seen anywhere in the world. And I've seen dock start racing in Crozon, in Saint-Tropez, in AWSI. I'm not sure where else they've done it around the world, but some of those had some dreadful faults with it, and I would
Like
really
what?
like. Well, I'd like the system that they had at Boot to be adopted as an international sort of standard, and worked on from there. AWSI, for example, they towed the two people up with a jet ski
Mhm.
past the start line, and then they had to go straight down a course, pumping speed, and they had to go around one mark at the end, but they're turning towards each other, which, that's not a good idea. And it was whoever was the bravest and just pushed kind of won in that situation. I don't think that's a good idea. The ones in Crozon, they had 4 people starting on a dock, and you had to go through a gate, so you could go left or right. But then overall, after you'd gone around that, you were turning right and heading around another mark and then towards the finish. So, you know, which dock you started on was favored. Like the extreme right-hand one was the fastest way to get around the course. So that wasn't fair and even and right either. The one in Saint-Tropez, that was actually that was pretty good. Like they had 2 people starting off a dock, but one had to go goofy, one had to go regular because they were off
Wow,
a dock.
that's
And
difficult.
well, it's okay if you're goofy and regular, but
Yeah,
if you're
yeah,
not,
Jake.
it's more difficult. And that one also was quite a long one, so they had to go out round a mark that was a long way out, then turn left, and it was a long, long way, and then across to the finish. And it sort of takes all the intensity out of it. The boot show, there's 2 side by side. They're right next to each other, and they zigzag through I think four marks, and then carve around a mark at the end, and then it's a sprint back round the mark and then through to the finish. So they're side by side, and they're also the turning, adding the quick turns through the marks is, and adds an intensity to it. And I think that would be a relatively easy thing to replicate anywhere in the world for racing. You could have a length of chain, and you have droppers that come up that you just hook
Yeah.
your buoys on, and you can just pull the chain out from your dock, and it would just sit there. So if it was established, you'd have the exact distances of all the various marks and the mark at the end. And at most people's docks around the world, they could set that up and train with that, so that when they got to a dock start competition, the course was a known course rather than some random thing that people come up with. I think that, to me, seems like a good idea.
I think so too. I was there last year,
Yep.
and actually that's when I saw you for the first time, but you were super busy, so I didn't introduce myself then. But I was there as well, and for me, the docks were really good. The height, I really liked the height.
Yep.
What I didn't like, and they did the same again this year, was the starting signal. Like they had the red, 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 and then green, so people could prepare and already start to move. I would have preferred, and I talked to Carlos about that. They just have a red and then suddenly turn it to green, so they have the reaction time as well.
Yep.
So it's not a problem for the people who start too early, because that was always a discussion, wasn't it?
Yep, that would add to it as well. I think there's a bit of to and fro to work out the best way to do the whole thing. And you mentioned the height of the docks too. There seems to be quite a different preference to that.
Yeah.
Yvonne and Catherine, they like a higher dock. And Catherine this year, when she was racing, she had like a stool effectively on the dock where she jumped off a higher surface to get the drop that she wanted. So I guess there's some time to work that out. It was quite funny doing the guys doing the racing in Crozon, because we had Luke Atkinson, Gray Morris, and Kai Thompson, and they'd never really done any dock start, and
Yeah.
they kind of went down with the boards and foils, and they watched all the young kids doing it. They're going, oh yeah, yep, I see, and then they basically learned for a day. And they actually did really well. Gray made it to the finals, and he ended up 4th. In that, he's 110 kg
That's
in dock
impressive.
start racing. So go figure.
Do you remember which foil he used?
He was using the 1010 Surge with a 320 rear on an ultra short fuse.
That is impressive. We're going to talk about your foils and especially the pump foils later on. I talked to Kai before and he said, yes, it was really fun, like this dock starting that he never done. I remember last summer, there were the code guys coming over and they've never dock started either.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for them, you saw as soon as they had the start, they were super good foilers, but like launching from a dock was so different for them as well. They were kind of scared as well. So that was fun to watch and fun to see the progression as well.
Have you ever recorded a session with a foiling app and then forgot to turn it off on your way home? Well, now with Foilsessions, you can actually crop your session, meaning that you can take out the car ride and just focus on your foiling, which is amazing. Try Foilsessions for free with the link below.
The other thing that's been pretty cool with the dock start guys is like Killian, very good at dock starting and, flat water lakes and all of that sort of thing. But he's obviously got, from his time, he's very, very good pump foiler and rider. And then he goes to somewhere, there's a surf location and he can jump off a rock, pump out to the waves, catch a wave. He needs to learn how to surf and he did that pretty quickly. But, coming at the surfing side, but having so much in the way of a base of foil skills. Interesting to watch and see how that evolves too.
We have this downwind scene here in Switzerland, and we usually go up by train and then usually go up with the parawing nowadays and surf down 20K or something. And there's always Yvon who joins us, but he's on his pump foil. He always dock start in the harbor and then gets out and downwinds the same kilometers that we do, but he just never
I
falls.
saw him in one of the Crozon events not this year, the year before. And like he basically jumped off a rock, pumped out to the start boat where they're doing downwind and, ran the course. And he was on a board that was like 1 or 2 liters. And there were people saying, oh, that's dangerous, he shouldn't do it. But no, he made the course and he was fine. It's an evolving space. Interesting to see what happens with all of that.
Maybe we can just get quickly into like how important is pump foiling and dock starting for axes for you? Is that like a major part? Is it growing or is it just like a little part in your whole foiling world?
Well, I think a big part of what I do is I'm just interested in how foils work and what can be done with them. So it's one of those parts, the same as downwind racing, wing foil racing, surfing, dock starting. It's part of it. And what I learn from one sport, often the lessons from that cross over into another sport. So I think it's incredibly important to understand it just from that point of view alone. But there are some peculiarities about it if you're talking long distance pump and really bigger span foils that we've learned. And again, some of that's actually crossed into other foiling as well. The fatty mast, the big thick mast that we've got that basically was the gateway to being able to use a 1750 span wing. We had built, I don't know, over the years, 3-4 prototypes of that sort of span wing and really struggled to get an advantage because you just couldn't get the control that you required. So, as that evolved and we came, as soon as we had the thicker mast and the fuselage with it as well, which gave the rigidity to control it, all of a sudden that was easy to ride. And I remember Dylan rode one of the first ones in New Zealand here, and he did a carving 360 with, I don't know, 600 mils of wing poking out of the water, and then put it back in and pumped away. And he'd never even dreamed that something like that was possible. But because of the stiffer mast connection and everything, that made the difference. So how important is pump foiling to us? It's a big part of our market, selling in Switzerland. Weirdly, a lot of other countries have taken a bit longer to catch on to it. I guess if you're thinking of Australia and stuff, they've just got so many really good waves. Why would you bother pumping on flat water when you can go out and surf waves? But in New Zealand, there's quite a strong crew of pump foilers, and maybe that's answered the question.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
And I was just, while you were talking about the fatty mast, and we're gonna, as I said, talk about these different foils and actually probably have a run through your website because there's so many different things. I talked to the guys who made the beta foil,
Yep.
and they have this double mast. Have you tried something like that as well, or you've always thought, no, that's nothing for us. We just keep it like we usually do.
So the double mast, it actually adds drag to the whole thing, but you can get around that by making them much thinner and
They're
narrower.
super
So I
thin.
mean,
Yeah.
they've obviously done that, and it definitely works. The big thing I hear about that is that it doesn't carve or turn the same way. You can pump it for once it's up and working, you can pump it for a long time, but it doesn't turn quite as naturally as a single mast. I think that can possibly evolve into something that does turn, but it's a bit different at the moment.
Your biggest one is the 1750, and I've tried it. I made a video about it a couple of weeks ago when this podcast airs, and it's impressive to me how these big foils, the 1500 and the 1750, how they pump. They feel like normal pump foils. You can still turn them, but they feel so incredibly effortless, and it's really a pleasure to pump. But I said it in the video as well, they're not beginner foils.
Absolutely not.
And my question is, if you build foils like that, do you have maybe Nicola who wants a foil like that, or maybe a few people who want a foil like that, and then you kind of want to provide for them, but are people actually buying these huge foils?
Yeah, we've actually sold a lot of the 1750 and the 1500. The 1500, excuse me, has got
No
some weird
problem.
applications for for downwind as well, and it has actually opened up downwinding on lakes and bumps that are almost hardly there. The key thing with getting bigger wings is that, like, as we developed a lot of those wings, I guess the 1500 is a good example. The 1500, as we've released, is a 17 aspect ratio. One of the first rounds we did of that, it was only 15 aspect ratio. And 1500 span at 15 aspect ratio was just too draggy. Like,
Yep.
the extra span created a little more lift, but the drag basically overwhelmed any extra lift that you had. So there was no particular advantage to it. So as you get higher and higher span, you need to make them higher aspect to reduce the drag back down again. The 1750 as well, during the development of that, we're doing 17, 18, 19, and the production one's over 20.
Yeah, it's impressive.
We've prototyped some bigger span wings again, and the aspect ratio is around 27.
Wow.
And those are same step up again. But as you were saying, not for everybody. These are even more not for everybody. Yeah.
How important is that when you build a foil like that? You more feel like, I want to do this for these few people who go into the extremes, or you have like the business plan and you think like, all right, I'm going to have to sell, so I want to do something
So
about that.
as I said before, it's more about finding out. I just want to find out what the limits are and what can be. The 1750, we were experimenting with that just to see what's actually possible. And now with our prototyping, we've gone way past that. That brings up another point is, when you're building wings that are over 20 aspect ratio, it gets very hard to hold them together. Like, the stiffness of the wing is absolutely critical. And like, I saw a foil the other day, and it had bits that you could take off and put the wings back together again.
Yeah.
You cannot do that. If you're trying to get performance out of a wing, you cannot have them coming apart and joining. They've got to be.
The Keto split, you're talking about that?
I don't know what it was, but you had wingtips you could take off
Yeah.
and put different ones on there. But you can't do that. If you're serious about dock start, you can't even think about that. It has to be one piece. Those wings, like the 1750, there is no core on them. They're just pure unicarbon all the way through. And there's 60 something layers of unicarbon in that wing. And we're pushing it anyway to get them to hold together at that span. And the idea of putting a join in there, you just can't even think about it. A big breakthrough for those was actually something we learned with the tempo wings. And that was also related to the race mast that we did, downwind race mast that we had. So little side story that kind of relates to all of that. When we were in Hawaii last year, preparing for the downwind racing, we had the tempo developed with the titanium fuselage, and all the wings are about 16 aspect ratio and quite small rears, 25 mil maximum chord, and very, very low areas, but very high aspect, low drag setups. They were going really, really well, but then at the last minute we kind of went, it would have been nice to have had a new mast, but it's too late. And then we're sort of thinking about that, and we thought, well, maybe it's not too late. Maybe I could try and sand one down. So with Frank Maffei's help, we sanded the woven carbon off the outside of a mast. And it was a 720 long mast, their maximum thickness 12.5 mil. We managed to get 1.1 mil off the whole entire mast, top to bottom, which is the woven carbon. The woven carbon was, I was going to say relatively easy, but it wasn't easy and it wasn't fun. But we managed to sand that woven carbon off the side of the mast. So the mast was thinner and consequently lower drag. And the first guys that rode that said it just completely changed the way the foil worked. So we had a bunch of riders over there. We had 19 masts that we had to resand down and redo the logos on. So we sanded all of that down. Key point I'm getting at with all of that, though, is on really, really thin things, like on the tips of the tempo wings and on the tips of the 1750. The wings are only, 3 mils thick. There's not much thickness there. And if you've got 1.1 millimeters on the very outside of woven carbon, the woven carbon is not very good for stiffness. Carbon is very good in tension, and you can imagine woven carbon is basically like this.
Yeah.
And the most important part of your laminate is the very, very outside, the first layer. So you've got to get that right, and having that in woven carbon instead of unicarbon was quite a big change. So after the racing in Hawaii, I got the factory to build a tempo wing with unicarbon to the outside, and they protested and everything because it's very difficult to build because the woven carbon is nice. It gives a nice pretty carbon layer and hides whatever's going on underneath with bumps or bubbles or anything. It's a nice buffer in there. But having the unicarbon on the outside, it was difficult. But the first wing we built, I'm trying to remember the data on it. I think on a 1020 wing with the load cells 100 mils in from each wingtip, and I think with 100 kg load on it, I think it was 35 mil with a woven carbon one, and I think it was 32 mil with the woven carbon, and with the unicarbon to the outside, it was only 25 mil deflection.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's a massive difference in stiffness just from changing the laminate. So we did the same with the 1500 and the 1750, and that is what made those wings what they are. And that also meant, okay, we can go higher aspect. So that's why we tried the 27 aspect wing, because once we'd done that, we found that was possible. So this is what I was saying about everything is linked to something else. You can't just design one type of foiling and expect to know all there is to know about foiling. Everything is linked and connected.
That is super interesting. Adrian, just if you see me wobbling around, I'm standing on a balance board. I'm just trying to improve my balance while we're talking,
Yep.
so I'm not dizzy or anything.
Getting
just
ready
yet.
to foil. Yeah.
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 You said that 27 aspect ratio. Why didn't that go into production then? What was the problem
It's
there?
just in development. We have a lot of foils that we just test stuff out. There's a lot of stuff that we don't rush into building, and in a similar fashion to what you were saying about the 1750 not being for everybody, this is even more not for everybody. But it does actually work. There has actually been some comment from some of the writers that we should probably put it into production, but we're still learning, and we might find a slightly better something with it. There's no desperate rush. I think the 1750 with Nico riding it I think that's kind of the world record for pumping, long distance. I think he's 4 hours 20 something minutes.
Yeah.
On the prototype, he said he's easily can go another hour or two on that. So we'll see.
But he's incredible anyway.
Isn't
He
he?
could probably
Isn't
go
he?
2-3 hours on any foil that I have.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's impressive. It's really cool. And he's so humble. He's so cool. And it's impressive to see how he pumps, like his cadence. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and such a cool guy. Yeah, really impressive what he does. When you say you're always developing, always looking for new stuff, is foiling still evolving that much? Aren't we at a spot where we can say, well, that's good. How is it getting better? I mean, it's so good already.
So every year we have, I think, kind of major breakthroughs. Like if I go back to the Fireball, when we released the Fireball, I mean, that was 13 aspect ratio and really efficient, and it was great. It was an amazing downwind wing. And then, like, as we released that, we'd already started doing some prototypes, and we had some 15 aspect wings that were, lower drag, better glide. They were faster. But I kind of felt like they needed to have a different fuselage system. So we kind of started developing the titanium fuselage with the join and everything for that. And that took quite some time. And we carried on developing, and by the time we got that working perfectly, we went to build the wing, and instead of building it 15 aspect ratio, we thought, well, let's just go a bit further. So we're in 16 aspect ratio on that. And the tempo has been, very dominant in the downwind racing. So in the Maui racing, there was 9 out of the top 20 were riding the tempo setup. And that was the earlier version with a prototype titanium fuselage and a prototype laminate and everything. Like the production tempo is a lot better than that. And then since that racing, we've had a lot of riders from other companies that have actually they've left a sponsored position to come in, and they said, look, I just have to ride Axis. There's no point in, and if I'm traveling the world and competing, there's no point in me riding whatever brand. I need to have Axis. So
How good does that feel?
Axis. So I would say the tempo is by far the dominant in the downwind racing at the moment. We've started prototyping for next year, for whatever we can do from there. And we're 100% confident that we can do a whole lot better again. We know that.
So not just
sure.
marketing talk, it's really evolving.
Oh, yeah. But we're not rushing to do anything with that, because the tempo already is fully outstanding as a downwind wing. And, if we keep developing, we've got time. We can carry on making stuff that's even better again. So who knows what it might come up with. Just because we make something better, we don't necessarily think, right, that's it. That's going to be the next thing. We carry on developing. People criticize Axis sometimes for having too many wings. If you actually saw how many wings we build and don't go to production, you'd be horrified. It's a lot of prototyping. And that's, again, I think that's driven by us because we just want to find out. It's not necessarily a business decision we're trying to. Evan jokes sometimes that we're a prototyping company that sells the occasional foil. We do a lot of testing. Yeah.
Maybe it's a dumb question, but as these tempos are so good, why can't you just upscale them for dock starting?
It's kind of what the 1750 is.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. You can call it a tempo if you want. It's a Fireball because it fits into that range, and it fits on the black fuselage. Talking of fuselage there, historically we had the red fuselage. That's what we started with. And at the time, the wing that we had, it was 920 span, and the cord was 270 mils. And the wing itself, it was 38 millimeters thick. And the red fuselage was a perfect fit in the top of that. But then as foils evolved, thinner and more high aspect, it no longer worked. So we kind of invented the black fuselage, and that worked really, really well. And then, like I was saying before, when we pioneered the tempo, there was just no way that we could make that work. Like if you pick up a tempo wing and a black fuselage and look at it, like, so where are you going to put that? There's just no space in there. So we had to create the titanium fuselage and the joining system. And it's not a cheap system, but it works. And I think that's one of the big points that make the tempo work so well. And if other companies want to build foils that are in that cutting edge for downwind racing, I think a lot of them are going to have to completely throw out their fuselage joining systems and come up with something that's a little more refined. We had to, and I think a lot of other companies will have to do that. A lot of them are sort of saying that's it, our fuselage that's what we have, and we will not make a change. But the idea of having a fuselage system that's optimized on a 2-meter span wing, and using that same fuselage system on a 700 span wing, it doesn't make sense. There's
You don't need the same thing, right? It's
no,
not a
no.
purpose.
No, the black fuselage is perfect for the 1750 and those bigger span wings. The Fireballs, the 1250s, 1350s, they're not really going to be going on the titanium fuselage. The titanium fuselage was for small, very high aspect wings. There's not much wing left there. So how are you going to attach it together? So, as we design new wings, we look at what they are and which fuselage system they might go on. There will be other wings that come to fit on the titanium fuselage, but it's step by step, wing by wing, to see which is most suitable for that.
How do you look back on your old wings? Because right now, my son, he's 11, and
Yep.
he's on the foil scoot, not the
Yep.
official one, but like a self-made one. And he pumps my Indiana foils, but he always looks at axes like, I want to pump axes. I'm like, well, they're older axis foils, which are probably still good. I'm not sure about the weight because he's still super young, super light. So when you look back at your old wings, are you still like happy how they are? Or would you also say, I'm not only going to produce for the racers, the super fast foils, I'm also going to do like foils for beginners that are maybe a bit cheaper, maybe that area, or is that not something
So
that you're
we
looking
sort
at?
of have that already, like with the P&G V2.
Mhm.
We do the 1200, the 1300, and the 1400, and they sort of came out of the original P&G, the 1150. The 1150, P&G 1150, would possibly be our biggest selling wing ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's still actually a pretty good wing. It was ahead of its time. It was quite high aspect, and it had quite a high camber, so very good lift.
Mhm.
And it worked very well. The P&G V2s, they don't, because they're not so high aspect, they don't need to be made in the ultra high modulus carbon, and they're a little more cost effective to build, so they aren't so expensive. Everything we build, just by the way, is we don't look at each product and think, right, how could we get the most out of this product? It's basically the same formula. How much does it cost? That's how much we can sell it for. So if it's more expensive, it's for a reason. It's because the carbon is more expensive, or the process, or something about it is more expensive. But we do try and build more cost-effective wings. So if you look at the new surge wings, the surf wings, because of the aspect ratio of those, they don't need to be built out of crazy materials, and they're actually not too badly priced.
And they're super fun. I was able to
Yeah.
pump
Yeah.
one of the surges of Kilian, and it was so fun and impressive. Like the low end is really impressive. That I'm able to dead start a 900 square centimeter foil. That's pretty cool.
You're still talking area.
Well, that's the number that's on the foil. So
Yeah.
that's what
I
how
try
would you
and like
how would you describe them then? Like
span.
just span?
Well, no, I mean, all of the details are important. There's no doubt
Yes.
about that. But in my opinion, if you're comparing foils, the span is the number one thing. The span is basically what gets you up. It's that span is what gives you the lift to get started.
All right.
The chord or the higher aspect ratio, there are less drag. So the less the higher aspect they are, it's like letting the handbrake off. So you've got the span to get you up, and then you've got how much handbrake you want to slow it down.
Okay.
Is another way of looking at it. And there's a lot of people going around now, I'm downwinding on such a small foil, and how cool am I because of that? It's nothing to do with that. It's because you've got a higher camber wing, which creates the lift, and you've still got the same span as you had last year, but you've taken away some chord and taken away some drag, and of course you can ride it.
So just
They're all
releasing
kind of
the
related.
handbrake then.
I've said this for too many years now, and people are sick and tired of hearing it, but I've said that if you're looking at wings, the span is possibly the best way to compare them one to another. But then you also need to look at the camber, how much camber the wing has,
Mhm.
and everything else. I mean, area comes into it, but it would be way down the list, in my opinion. And, you know, it's down there with color as far as important. Yeah.
You know what? Funny that you say that, because my son who wants to ride axes, he likes the red mast. So,
Yep.
color's important too.
Yep.
So maybe let's talk about these surges, because are those your newest foils?
Yes, they would be the
Oh,
most
there's
recent
probably
release.
so many, but it's actually it's the first time that I've pumped them, and they're really fun. Like they turn super well, but are still possible for me to start, which also is kind of important. So that is so much fun. You're also there. You have 6 different surges.
I
Or
don't know.
well, I'm just on your website.
Yep.
Um, how much how much can you just upscale them, or how much do you have to look at each front wing individually to see if it actually works if you just upscale?
All of the surge wings so far have been 9.5 aspect ratio, the ones that we've released, and they work great through the whole range. Very, very happy with them. We're working on larger ones, and as they go bigger span, they need to be higher aspect. Otherwise, like I was saying before, the
Mhm.
um, extra span gets you the lift, but the extra drag from having more area uh, sort of takes that away. So there's no
Mhm.
real benefit. So we're going through quite a bit of testing and rebuilding of the larger ones, and they will be ready when they're ready. It takes time to get those exactly right. We're not in any hurry to get them finished and out there. You know that they will be ready at some stage. Um, how the surge came about, it's actually, there's a lot of things in our wings that have led us to that. So I guess one of the things that the surge has got in it is the Spitfire wing. The Spitfire was our first wing that had a what we call a straight median line. If you take the thickest point in the wing, which is roughly where the center of lift is, it's a dead straight line from wingtip to wingtip. It's not raked back. You know, in the
Okay.
earlier days of foiling, all the foils were raked back a long way, and
Yeah.
the one of the problems with that is that your center of lift in the middle of the wing and the center of lift in the tip of the wings is in a completely different place. So even if you've got a straight trailing edge and a curved leading edge, your center of lift is actually raked back. And what happens as you go faster and faster is the lift in the tips can increase, and it can actually create a pitching moment. So
Okay.
you have to have a larger rear to compensate for that. So this relates to the fireballs and the tempos and lots of other things. That straight median line means that you can get away with a smaller rear. If you can get away with a smaller rear, it's easier to turn. It's quicker to turn because you haven't got the rear wing, you know, interfering with your turning. So the surge has got a straight median line in its format. So that came from the Spitfire and the Fireball and the Tempo and all the other wings as well. The foil sections that evolved through that time, the Fireball and the Tempo foil section, it's a higher camber foil section. And generally, when you make a higher camber foil section, it gives you more lift, but it comes with the penalty of more drag. The
Yeah.
foil section that we've used on that is actually it's a pretty good one. Like, it doesn't have that much added drag to it, which is a bit of a peculiarity with that particular foil section. Mostly as you go higher camber, you end up with so much drag that you don't end up with any benefit. So we're able to use that foil section even at 9.5, like a low aspect surge, a 9.5 aspect ratio wing, and it's still not too draggy. So it's got that. The other thing it's got is it's got the, I call it moustache, where the wing goes down and comes
Yeah.
back up again. And we had always done our wings just sort of for pure efficiency. So if you look at the Fireball and the Tempo, they're basically straight with a little bit of turn down in them. And it doesn't take much pressure on them. If you put one on a flat table and push on it, just with a couple of fingers, it bends pretty much dead straight. So the aim is for those wings to be efficient. And if the wing is dead flat under load, a foil section generates lift at 90 degrees to the foil section, straight up. So
Yep.
if you've got a wing that's flat, all of the vectors are pointing straight up. So you've got efficient lift and there's not a lot of drag. If you have a wing that's turned down and then turns back up again, you've got vectors that are pointing out and then pointing back in again. So you end up with vectors that are kind of exaggerated, pointing
Okay.
towards each other.
Yeah.
So you're adding drag to a system. So you wouldn't necessarily do that moustache business on a wing that is purely for racing. So the Tempos don't have moustache characteristics in them. But we started playing with that turn down, and we did quite a few different prototypes in that. And one of the very first ones we did is I took a Fireball 1000 and we did the same foil section, the same outline. It was the same wing, but instead of just being the shape that it was, it had the down and the up in it. And it proved to us that it was slightly less efficient for getting up and going. It was a little more drag for top end speed, but it did actually have a different characteristic for turning. And I think what it does is having the downturn and then it starts going the other way, it actually acts like a narrower span wing because the tips are pointed upward. They're less effective, less lift. The lift is going up a little bit with them. So it allows the wing to be rolled side to side. The other thing about it, I think, is the water flow over the tip. Although it's not creating as much efficient lift, it does create some stability having that water flow moving over the tip. It also helps with tip breach as well.
Yes,
So it
that's
helps
what I
with that.
wanted to say, because we have beautiful images of Yvon when he breaches with his tip, like
Yep.
his slow-mo videos was amazing. So that
Yeah.
helps if you
Yep,
have the moustache.
definitely helps with that. And the idea of that is, let's say you've got if you take the old ART, they came along and it had quite a bit of turn down right at the tip. And when that tip popped out, because of the shape of it, when that popped out, it didn't just poke a tiny bit, it all of a sudden poked quite a big chunk of foil out of the water. And you can imagine with that turn down on the original ART wings,
Yep.
there were some vectors facing outwards. And when that suddenly popped out of the water, it was missing a balanced vector because it was out of the water.
Yep.
So it would throw you off and be difficult. So the Tempo and the Fireball, they actually still breach pretty good, and they don't have the moustache business, and that's because they're virtually straight. So you can pop just a little bit and work it out. But the Surge have got a lot more. It's only 1 degree turn up at the tip, but when it breaches, it does breach pretty seamlessly and pretty smoothly. The other weird thing that's quite good with it is jumping. You can pop out of the water and then land back in the water, and having the downturn and the turn up and all the various vectors, it does seem to allow better reconnection and shedding of the water so that it doesn't breach the whole foil and, doesn't aerate the whole foil and collapse. You seem to be able to land a lot more easily with that style of foil.
That is more for winging, though. Well, they're obviously also.
No, it's for surfing. It's for hitting whitewater,
Okay.
and popping aerials. And a lot of the dock start guys are actually doing jumps now.
Crazy.
Look, you never know where it's going, and like I said, it all crosses over from one to the other to the other. It's not, it's not a straight line. Yeah.
How many like inquiries do you get? How many times do you have foilers who say, "Can you please make me this? I need a smaller board. I need this and that." And how can you handle these like questions and orders, kind of?
I can only do so much at one time, effectively and nicely. So I kind of prioritize things a little bit to work on things. I'm just trying to think how that relates to something at the moment. And I feel like we've done very, very good wings with the Surge for surfing. And I think we've absolutely nailed that. And watching Luke in the Crozon surfing event and his powerful surfing, it's the first time I'd actually seen, it looked like pure surfing and his hits on the white water. Amazing. So I feel like we've done really well in that. Feel like we've done really well in the downward race. And we're working on the next thing, which we know is even better again. Feel like we've done pretty well on the dock start, although we're still doing work and evolving what's going to happen next in that. The one thing that it's taken a lot more than I thought to work on is a wing foil race setup. And we've been working on that for quite a few years, and I'd like to think we're actually pretty close with that. But it has taken quite some time. But the lessons we learn from that will actually be very useful for all sorts of other foiling as well. So as far as trying to do too many things at the same time, I kind of have to work logically with it. Otherwise, you just, it's not a random activity. You have to sort of have some sort of plan as to where you're going with it all.
I would love to get to know a day in the life of Adrian Roper. But maybe just before we come to that, because we talked a lot about different foils, and you also said about test riders and whatnot. How important are women in the field also in testing, or kids, like lighter kids? Is that important as well? You look at that as well?
Absolutely. It doesn't actually matter whether you're a guy or a girl or a kid or older. It doesn't really matter. Everyone's feedback is useful to me. And that's actually some of my best learnings have been in Maui when I was driving. I was just driving up and down the coast and launching, half a dozen riders, picking them up at the other end. And the first words they say when they come ashore are the most useful. They don't know what they're actually saying, but they say, "Oh, I did this, whatever," and I can interpret that and work that out into something useful. If they sit there and talk with their mates about it and think about it and try and actually analyze it themselves, they actually tangle up the idea, and they will sometimes give me feedback to say, "This is what you need to do," and it's like, no, it's completely the wrong direction. So the first words they say when they come out of the water are sometimes the most important.
All right. Very, very good to know. This question, Catherine says, hi. I asked in my local WhatsApp group if anyone wants to ask you a question, and that was one of her questions. You may have expected that as well.
Didn't expect that one, but she's amazing because last year I think it was in Melbourne for it was Wingfoil Nationals or something, and she just turned up out of the blue there, and I seem to just bump into her everywhere around the world. It's classic. Yeah.
Another question was the pump foil board, and I've used pump foil board from Kilian that is not officially on your website, so I'm not sure if you can talk about that. But you have these. How do you call your pump foil boards? I don't remember.
Dock boards.
Yeah. Oh, yes, exactly. Doc,
Yeah.
what is it? $9.99 or something like that?
There's a 999 and an 899. I think the 899 is on the website now.
It's on the website. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Maybe it
yeah,
is
yeah.
now already, or if we release that. I really like that. But there was this one guy who said, well, can't it just be flat?
So there's a bit of a trick with that too. So what I'm trying to do with the dock board is key things is you want it as stiff as possible. And to make it stiff, you need to make it as thick as you can get away with at the boxes, at the front of the foil. But at
Mhm.
the very front of the board, the tip of the board, you don't need any thickness. There's no bending moment or anything on that. The other thing you've got is the board touches down sometimes. So you want it to be able to pop back up nicely. I don't think having big cutouts in your outline and things like that, I don't think that helps when you touch down. So there's that, but there's also sort of a personal preference for the angle of your feet
Yeah.
on the board. Some people prefer to have more of a downward angle on the deck of their board, but obviously if it's pointed way down, then if the board touches, the nose is going to catch and you're going to get flicked off. So we've tried to balance that with the dock board by having it thicker at the box and having a rocker on the bottom, and then having the deck actually coming downhill, and that kind of ticks both boxes on that.
I really like
It
it.
is personal preference, and we are working on some boards that are a little more flat and a little more parallel for people that they just never touch. You know,
Yeah.
Nico, for example, you know, he's out there for 4 hours. He's never touching the water, so it doesn't matter.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. But stiffness is a critical thing
Mhm.
for the efficiency of your pump. Like if the board is just made of plywood and bending, you're losing a lot of your efficiency to flexibility.
Yes, and of course there's much more to it than dock starting. There are a bunch of downwind boards as well, and this special trench board for
Yep.
foil drive that was quite impressive. But maybe we can talk about, like, you have so many things, you know all about everything. Is every idea going through you? How does a workday for you look like?
It depends. It depends on what it is and how it works. And I used to design and build all of all of our foil boards as well. And I built boards all my life. That's what I did. You know, I'm 60 something or other now, and I built my first windsurfer when I was about 14, 15 years old, and I built many windsurfers in New Zealand. I moved to Hawaii when I was 19 and built windsurfers there for 8 years for various people, and I learned a lot about building boards, and that's sort of what I know. I actually had to learn about foils, and I'm still learning about foils. But boards are something that I actually knew inside out because I'd lived that my whole entire life. Um, as Axis has got bigger and more involved, I didn't have as much time to do everything. And I ended up meeting Frank in Hawaii, and he was designing downwind boards, the Frank downwind boards. And some of our riders were already riding them. Some of them tested it and really liked them. And I ended up talking with Frank. He's a great guy, very easy to get on with. And, you know, I sort of suggested to him that we could do something together rather than me. I said, look, I can make something quite like your board. I know how to shape and design boards, but I'd rather work with you and have your design. So I took him to China, and we had, I think it was 10 days there or something like that. And we built 19 boards. It was mostly supervising the workers in the factory and going through and making sure everything was done right. But at the end, I remember taking a photo of him as he was QCing one of the boards, and he was looking at it and just shaking his head. He just couldn't believe that in 10 days we could just switch on production that quickly. But, you know, I've been working in China for 15 years now, and I've got some really good connections with factories and workers there, and, you know, I can make stuff happen quite quickly there. So we've carried on with that, and we've done the darts and the mini darts this year, and we'll carry on working with Frank and doing more with boards. He's a great guy, really good to work with, and it's nice to collaborate rather than say this is all mine and I'm going to do everything. I'd rather involve people that are really good and give some stuff away. It doesn't all have to be me. Designing the foils, in actual fact, I work quite closely with Kevin. He's a mate of mine from the early days of windsurfing, and he does a lot of the technical design stuff and a lot of the analysis and everything of things. And I think we work quite well together. Like a lot of designing something is designing something that can actually be built. So, you need to have that in your mind when there's no point in designing a theoretical
Yeah.
wing that's perfect, but it's impossible to build it in carbon fiber or whatever material you choose to use. So, I think we work very well together to try and develop things as well. And there's not a lot of ego between us on that. Sometimes he comes up with an idea that's just out of left field, but it really makes a huge improvement. Sometimes it's me, and we work together really well to actually come up with what we come up with. So it isn't just me. There's a lot of us working with it, and again, a big part of it, like I've said, is the construction side of it. Like, because we are designing and building stuff that's kind of cutting edge, you can't just send it off to China and hope for the best, And I do generally 5 trips a year to China, working with the factories and in there sanding, laminating, whatever, and actually trying to teach people to do things exactly how they need to be done. You can't just send it away and expect the best. These factories, although they're working in this industry, they're not working perhaps at the level that where I want it to be. So it takes time and effort to make that happen. What was
So
the
that
question
sounds like,
again?
I should sit back and listen. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your day is a lot of designing, obviously, but also a lot of calls, a lot of meetings, travels. We talked about that already. Um, are you actually able to get on the water yourself?
Yep. I had a session yesterday at my local beach in Southwest. I just went for a wing foil. And it was pretty good. It's looking pretty good today too.
I don't want to hold you on up
Yeah.
too long. When you go out, and it's mostly wing foiling, is it?
Mostly wing foiling for my testing. I do a bit of sup-foiling as well if the conditions are suitable locally. Um, yeah, and my wing foiling is, I don't know, it's not your typical, well, I don't know, maybe it's typical wing foiling. I like riding upwind and then hopping on the wave and surfing it back down again and going up and doing it again. I've got some parawing stuff and I'm trying to learn that as well, because I think that is even more so what I do, going upwind and then surfing back down again.
Which one are you currently using? That's always the big question.
The parawing,
Yeah.
I've got the Ozone, I think called Power Packs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are pretty good.
Yeah. Yep.
How
And I've got
difficult was it for you to adapt to the parawing?
I'm still learning. I'm absolutely ground zero on that. Yeah. And I don't think it's easy.
So, what do you have planned for this year? You said you want to travel a little less, 5 times to the factory in China. You went to both already. What else is planned for you?
I'll be doing the racing in Hawaii. I find that very beneficial, and I learn a lot from that. And part of my job there is supporting our crew that are racing, but also we'll have new wings
A lot of
that we're
sanding
testing
then,
and
huh?
stuff. So it's getting feedback and testing and refining and building some stuff that, like, we build it in the factory, but then when it gets to Hawaii, sometimes I can fiddle with it and sand it and change things a little bit to do whatever. And Frank helps me out with that too. Bit of grinding and sanding here and there. Yeah.
That is amazing. Man, this sanding story, I've heard it probably in another podcast already. It is
Yep.
so cool. And to me, as an outsider, it shows how passionate you are. You still are within this industry. And that's so cool. Also, you traveling to all these places to just be there. That's what
Honestly, I
is
learned so much. I learned so much from all of those riders and working with them and getting feedback on how things work. And it's very beneficial from that side of it as well. They're all really good crew too, like a lot of the European stuff last year, traveling with Gray and Luke and Kai. They're crazies, and it was a lot of fun. I don't know. I wasn't supervising, but watching them do their thing. Yeah. And it was also really good to see Yvonne and meet with him in person. And I'd met him before as well, but in Saint-Tropez this year, he was doing the dock start testing on some of the big wings. We had some much bigger 1750s, and just seeing him on a dock, I don't know, a meter and a bit off the water, and he
That's
just kind of holds
crazy.
it and just drops it and steps on. Like there's no running down the dock and getting it sorted. He would just drop and go. And almost first time every time with that. And, he'd disappear out 15, 20 minutes, way out, miles out. Then he'd come all the way back in and he'd work something out and we'd try the next thing and the next thing.
How
And
important?
again, being there with him and hearing the very first things he said and what he tested and how he tested it, that's actually given me the chance to build some completely different fuselage
Really?
with him as well, and testing some crazy ideas with that.
I was just curious because Yvon has been with Axis, I don't know, forever, or at least it seems like, and Kilian as well. And then we have Nicola who changed to Axis. How important are like outside views? Because when we tested this 1500, the 1750, for me, as maybe as I've used it before, or that I change a lot of foils when I do reviews and whatnot, there was another guy who was really good, especially downwinding, but also dock starting, but he never pumped Axis. Then it was super difficult for him. How important are outside views for you? Do you even get those?
Yep. Typically, like if we are developing a new foil, I mean, the pump foil 1750 span, big span wings, they're a little bit specific, but we generally send those to the likes of Yvonne. Like every wing that we develop, we look at what it's supposed to be for, and we try and send it to appropriate people to get a really good opinion of it. But if you're talking big span dock start wings, we send them to Killian, Yvonne, crew over there. And I also send them to New Zealand. We've got a local crew here that are actually really good riders, and they give really, really good feedback. And again, having that feedback firsthand as they've just done each pump and each run, that really helps a lot as well. Some of them are not pumping at the level of Nico
Well,
or Yvonne,
with
but it's still very, very useful feedback, of course. Yeah. And some of them, may be riding some other foil and they'll hop on and, say something as well. So I take feedback however I can take it. The most important, like the feedback I can trust the most is what comes back through my feet myself. I can 100% rely on that. But the rest of it, I'm trying to interpret and make it into something useful. And it all works pretty well, I think.
so cool. And you've been in this industry for a long time, so you
Too
know how
long.
to interpret, as you said.
Yeah.
Are there any plans on maybe taking a step back at all?
Haven't, not really. No, I still enjoy what I'm doing and I'm still learning. And I think right from the beginning, a huge driver for what I do is to understand things. When we first started doing foiling, Evan made me go foiling, and it was kite foiling at the time. And, I kind of learned how to do it. But as I was learning, I was trying to think, oh, this is not working, and but I didn't actually have the skills to work it out. But once I'd learned to foil, I started questioning things, and I was asking a lot of people in the industry, why is this, why is that? And they said, oh, it's just the way you do it. But that wasn't good enough. I wanted to find out why. That's what I want to know. I mean, one of the first questions is, you've got your fuselage and you've got your front wing, and they had them on exactly the same angle. And it seemed quite obvious to me that when you look at a foil in flight, there's kind of a sweet spot. Obviously, the more angle of attack, it creates more lift, and lower angle of attack, it's faster, but creates less lift. There's an angle where most foils work, in a nice way. And if it's the right size foil for you, you're probably riding at that angle. So that's about 1 degree. So my question was, why don't you mount the front wing at 1 degree to the fuselage so that the fuselage is running straight? And everyone just said, oh, that's the way it's been done. We just do it that way. I like to understand it. I'm not trying to copy something. I'm trying to understand it. And if you understand it, I think you can actually develop on from there. A lot of things that I'm doing, like a lot of tours I do around, I go to the shop in Australia, for example, or wherever, and I will talk to the shop staff and try and explain foiling to them. I think foiling is relatively simple if you break it down into steps. So I'm trying to explain it to people so that they can work it out for themselves. And I think you get a lot more satisfaction if you can feel that and work it out for yourself. And the talks that I do to people at shops, I try and do the same, try and break it down. And a lot of people have come up afterwards and said, look, I learned more about foiling and that than I knew about before. I'm trying to pass that on so that people can work it out for themselves. The shimming of the rear wing and what it does and how it works. I've broken that down and explained that many times, rather than just saying, oh, the blue shim didn't work, try the red one. I try and explain what it actually does so that people can work it out and progress for themselves. It seems to be a more sensible way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked at another brand and said like, oh well, that was a good idea. That should have been my idea. Or you just focus on yourself?
I always look at whatever else is going on, and you'd be crazy to ignore everything else that's out there in the market. But I'm generally pretty happy that we're in a good direction with what we're doing, and very happy with it. There's a lot of stuff I look at and I just shake my head. I just think if someone thought about that for more than 5 minutes, they'd go, that's not a good idea. But it's done, and some of
I'm
the
not going
quick
to ask for
release
names.
systems for the base plates and joining it, it's like I don't see any advantage to any of that. It's the most important thing that you come back to in foiling is when you're foiling, you're riding that front wing. That's the main thing you're doing. So how well that front wing attaches to the fuselage, how stiff the fuselage is, and how stiff the joint is from the fuselage to the mast, how stiff the mast is. Those are absolutely crucial to get the performance out of that front wing. You can design a front wing that's absolutely fantastic, but if it's got a wobbly join through the whole thing, then you're not going to get any performance out of it.
Mast connection to the board might be a point.
Yep.
Not sure if how you feel about it. For me, it's kind of a pain because when I think I would have to change everything in my quiver just because of that. How do you look at this? What do they call it? The tuttle box, or how do they call it? That
The Tuttle box. So the
is
Tuttle
that
box was designed in, I think, 1984 by Larry Tuttle, and it was designed to hold a 12-inch long fin. I say 12 inches because it's America. And it did that very, very well. And I was building windsurfers during that whole timeline. And as the fins got longer and longer and strong, more stiff, the original Tuttle head that was designed ended up damaging the boards and damaging, so we built the boxes stronger and stronger, but it still had trouble holding together. And I actually said, what we need is to make the Tuttle box go deeper into the board. And everyone said, no, it won't make any difference. And I said, well, it will. So I just went and built it. And I built one. The Tuttle box was massive, the casting box for the fin. And we used to build them all the way through. They were actually past the deck of the board, and we would measure up the back and front of the box and then cut the top of the fin so that it came all the way up to the top of the board. They were really difficult to get in because of the friction fit over a deep Tuttle. So we had to wax them to slide them into the board. But those fins, they never broke, and the connection was way better, the connection, of the fin. And it made a world of difference to how they went from that. The biggest problem that I see with using a foil with a Tuttle box is that to make something stiffer, you make it thicker, and you also add cord to it, which actually helps with the torsion.
Mhm.
And the cord and the thickness that we need at the top of the mast is much thicker than a Tuttle connection, and it's much longer than a Tuttle connection. So to build something that's this fat and then step in to a little tiny skinny Tuttle, that makes no sense at all. You could make a newer system, and some of the things that you really need is something that like a plate type thing that sits on the board so that you can actually still
you have
change and
a
shim the
leverage.
angle. But but the problem is you need to also move it forward and backwards. So moving it forward an inch, back an inch makes a big difference. And the reason that a Tuttle box works is because it's got the end of the box. So if you had a slot that was, much, much longer, there's no way of stopping the box from spreading because you don't have the ends. The ends are too far out. So kind of can't have that either. The stupid plate system that we've got. I'll tell you a little story about how that came about, because that's pretty stupid as well. That there's a company, a French company. They wanted us to build some boards for them in China, and they were actually, they'd just changed to a plate system. So they sent the board design. I said, "Yep, no problem, we can do that." I said, "How do you want to attach the bolts to the board?" And they sort of said, "Oh, you get a bolt and you cut a slot on the end of it. You put some sandpaper in there, put it through the hole that you've drilled in the board, and then whaz the drill to eat a bit of the core away, and then you pour resin in that hole and then tap it." And I said, "No, I'm not going to do that. It's silly." So I said, "What I'll do is I'll put 2 fin boxes in there." And they said, "Oh, it won't work." And I said, "Well, it will work. I've built windsurfers for 20, 30 years, and we have 1 fin box for the mast step, and we have 1 bolt on the mast step, and it doesn't break. It's fine. It's strong enough. It'll be fine." So we used a windsurf mast step slider, and I put 2 boxes in the board, and they used it, and they said, "It's great. You can slide forward, you can slide backwards. It works really, really well." And I said, "Right, let's try and make this a bit of an industry standard." So there was 2 other companies with a plate mounting. The company that I was building some stuff for, their spacing was 90 millimeters. There's another company was 88 mils, and one was 84 mils. And I said, "How about we all just use 90 mil?" And they said, "Oh, no, we invented the sport, so everyone has to follow our 84 mil or 88 mil or whatever like that." So I just said, "Look, the widest was 90. It's most sensible to do that." So we did that, and we carried on with that. And that's where the stupid Finbox system came from.
I'm still impressed that this is an industry standard. I never thought that
It's not the best. It's not the best, but it's what
but
happened
it's
accidentally.
all over the place. You can use your foil, your mast with any board, and that's
Yeah.
impressive as
Yeah.
is. So I'm really thankful for that.
It
All
could be
right,
better,
man.
and if you had a chance to design it from scratch, it would be a really good idea. There's another system that someone was doing with a single bolt and a tapered wedge that goes into a
Yeah.
board, and there's nothing to stop it moving forward and backwards. And I don't see a better system than the plate as it is at the moment. And the plate actually functions pretty well, and it allows you to build everything stiff next to your board, which is really important as well. And you can taper your mast down for low drag for the bit that's cutting through the water. I think there's not a whole lot wrong with the plate right now.
Yes, and plus, as soon as you're foiling, it's out of the water anyway, and you
Yep.
don't feel it. All right, man. Well, thank you very much for taking your time. Is there anything else, Adrian, that you want to tell the world?
No, I could carry on talking for a bit longer, but I think I've covered a fair bit for now. Yeah.
That's super cool. I really hope to see you live again someday. Maybe if you're in Europe, or maybe if I come to another place. Thank you so much, man. And have a good
Yep.
session if you go out today again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It was really good to have you testing the 1750 and giving your feedback on that. It was really, that was a cool video of the testing you did.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I wanted to test some more, but it's super hard to get a hold of these foils. Like Kilian, I can use his foils as long as he's here. And he
Yep.
always like takes a good look how I handle these things. So it's really not easy to to get those foils
He's a
for a
classic,
longer
that
time,
Killian. There's
because
only
usually
one of
I
him.
have them for a week or 2 or something.
Yeah. No, he's not going to let go of it for a week.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe just for my son, which foil would you recommend for him? He's
How
like
many
30
kgs?
He's 11. He's 30 something kilos. And he really wants to get into dock starting. He uses that foil scoot. He really likes it, but now he's over a minute. He said, "Now I'm ready for dock starting, for pump foiling with a regular pump foil."
So the athletic carving, turning, dock starting, the small surge, like the 890, the 830, the 780, he'd have a great time on those. For longer distance stuff, I think the 1500 is just going to be too much, too
Yeah,
big,
that's too much. No,
drag.
I think if a surge would be fine. Also, if like he gets out of balance, that he it turns back under him, would be good to start.
Yep. So a surge would be good for fun. pumping, dock starting. I think perhaps the tempos, if you could find someone to have a go on one of those, like the 1020 or something like that, might be interesting.
Okay, I think that
I mean,
might.
that would be effectively the same as a 1500 for a normal sized person.
But with the tempo, which tempo did you say?
1020.
1020. Yeah, those.
Even a
look
1090.
beautiful.
If you could borrow one of those, have a go. It'd be very interesting to see how we went on that.
Do you know who has them in Switzerland or who rides them? Maybe an ambassador or something?
Not really. I'm sure someone's got them there, though.
Yeah.
He's not really Switzerland, but I think Yuri Schreiber's got some of those.
Okay, yeah,
He's got
he's
a
in
1020.
Austria, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit far away. But yeah, those ones look really nice. Or
They're
the Surge, right?
basically, it's, they're quite high aspect, and they would be the equivalent of, a normal size rider riding the 1500 or the 1750.
But maybe the Surge is easier to get a hold.
The Surge is way
of.
more fun, and young fella, that's probably where he's at.
Yes. All right, good.
They
Then
don't have the focus to go for 3-4 hours or whatever.
No.
Ah.
Who wants that? No. But I'm just gonna have to see where
Yeah.
I can get one of these foils then. Well, thank you very much, Adrian. Really cool.
Cheers. Nice chatting.
Have a good one.
See
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.